I got a lot on my plate right now. At the time of this recording, I have to do a lot of stuff. I am currently updating the new version of HCA, which I'm hoping to launch in the next 4 to 6 weeks. I'm creating a new evergreen webinar, a new live webinar. It's a lot. And honestly, I feel a little bit overwhelmed. Now, in business, even when you're in the later stages of your business like myself, overwhelm is sort of unavoidable, right? And in my HCA students, when they come into our program, they often feel overwhelmed because truthfully, HCA helps them build a business from scratch. And that is no small undertaking, right? There's a lot to learn and there is a lot to execute. So overwhelm is inevitable. And essentially, overwhelm is when the brain perceives too much input and it can't process and it triggers the stress response, right? Your amygdala, which is the fear center of the brain, and you probably know this, I'm preaching to the choir, but that amygdala goes red alert, like too much, too fast. And then your prefrontal cortex, which is the part that plans and focuses, basically takes a break. And then we struggle with decision making. And sometimes we feel paralyzed. Now, physical signs of overwhelm are essentially the same as stress, right? Racing heart, tense shoulders, brain fog, wanting to just like crawl into a closet in the fetal position, right? And it's backed by research. So study shows that overwhelm reduces working memory, it leads to decision fatigue, and it increases procrastination. And that is according to the American Psychological Association. Okay. Now, how does overwhelm show up in business, right? Maybe you're drowning in too many strategies, right? Should I do TikTok? Should I do email? Should I do webinars, right? Maybe you're building those things. You're building your content, you're writing emails, you're building your webinar. There's tech you don't understand. This is very common for the early stage health coaches, right? There's tech and you are frustrated and you can't figure out how to do anything. And then another way we feel overwhelmed is comparing ourselves to other coaches online, right? So it feels like I'll never figure this out, right? I don't even know where to start. Everyone has it together but me, okay? Now, it's really important to understand that overwhelm is very normal. Every coach, even me, faces this, right? I just told you about how currently I am overwhelmed, right? There's been big market shifts this year. So I'm having to overhaul the marketing of both programs and also what we teach inside HCA to basically adapt to these new market shifts. But here's the thing. I'm still showing up. I'm still moving forward. The overwhelm has had zero impact on how I am moving forward in my business, right? Because truthfully, overwhelm is a choice. It's a choice. And that could be maybe a hard truth, right? That might feel uncomfortable. But here's the thing. You can't necessarily control feeling overwhelmed, right? Feelings happen. Your brain's going to react. But you can control whether you sit in it and let it stop you, okay? For example, if you're standing in a rainstorm, you can't stop the rain, but you can make the decision whether you're just going to keep walking or whether you're going to go, hang out inside and wait for it to end. You have choice in it, right? So in order to better manage overwhelm, we can do a few different things, right? We can plan ahead, we can prioritize, we can give ourselves grace, we can let go of perfection, and we can really just focus on solving one problem at a time. A big thing with overwhelm is when there's a lot of tasks to do and we don't know where to start and we're trying to do all of them at once. And a really big thing that can help squash overwhelm is to prioritize, okay? So brain dump and prioritize. So something that can be really helpful is to just get everything out of your head, right? Write down literally everything you need to do, right? And just get it out of your brain, whether that's in like a notes app, whether that's a journal, your choice, but just remember your brain is not a storage unit, okay? So you can brain dump everything you need to get done and then pick the top 1 to 2 things that actually are going to move the needle, right? Maybe figure out, is there an order in which these things need to get done? For example, if we're looking at building an email funnel, maybe we're like, oh my God, we need the freebie. I have to write the email nurture sequence. I have to build the landing page. Like I have to set up the ads. Like, oh my God, this is so much work. It's like, well, what do we need first, right? Well, the freebie is what everything is based around, right? The opt-in page promotes the freebie. The email nurture sequence goes out after the freebie. So probably we just need to start with the freebie. Okay. So instead of being like, well, I got to launch my program, I got to redo my website, I got to run ads, I got to post reels, like focus on refining the order, right? Launch the program, redo the website, run ads. Like maybe what we need to just focus on is getting our content strategy, setting our ads up, and then thinking about launching our program later. Okay. So prioritization is really important. And if you have a coach, if you come into HCA, we will help you prioritize, right? Because people often, come onto their first call, they've gone through a bit of the course, like I'm so overwhelmed. And we're just like, do the course, do the program exactly how it's laid out. Don't deviate. Don't go anywhere else. Do it from step 1 to step 5. Okay. Now, the second thing you can do to help squash overwhelm is to set micro goals, right? So it's really helpful if you break down tasks into tiny, doable pieces, right? Because this just helps your brain get quick wins. Okay. So, for example, let's say on your to-do list is, build my sales page. Well, you're like, oh my God, like that's crazy. But what if we broke that down into all the micro tasks, right? So maybe the first thing we need to do is break that sales page up into sections and then write it section by section and just maybe in a Google Doc, right? We're not worrying about design. We're not worrying about where we're hosting it, that sort of thing. So something like build a sales page should probably not be on your to-do list because it's actually a huge task, right? We have to write it. We have to design it. We have to host it. We have to test it, right? And so what will be helpful is when you break those down into micro tasks, right? So for example, in HCA, we break down our sales page into individual sections and we tell you which section to start with first, right? And you do it in a specific order, not necessarily from top to bottom, right? And so maybe on your to-do list is write section, 2, 3, and 4 of my sales page. And then tomorrow it's the next sections. And then, we just slowly break down every bigger sort of project into individual tasks, right? And there's research on this. So research shows that when you have small successes, it actually increases dopamine, which makes it more likely that you are going to keep going, okay? Now, something that I love is time blocking, okay? So when I sit down every week at my computer, I always know what I'm working on. The worst thing you can do is sit down at your computer and just be like, all right, what do I work on, right? You should honestly know that in advance. And so this requires planning. Planning is something that I think we all know helps us, but a lot of us don't want to do it. So figure out what will make you actually want to plan. So I'm very, I'm very used to planning now. I do it every Thursday or Friday. I sort of sit down at my computer and I time block out my calendar for the next week. Now, what I used to do, because it really took me a bit of time to sort of develop this discipline and this habit of planning, is I would go to a coffee shop and I'd have a little journal and I'd get myself like a drink and a snack, like something I liked. And basically I would do that every week on a Thursday. And it was kind of like a ritual that I would look forward to. I'd get out of the house, I'd have like a muffin or something like that. I'd have like a nice coffee or a nice whatever. And I, sit in a coffee shop with a nice view and I would do my planning for the week. And so if that is something that will help you start planning, then I definitely recommend doing that. Okay. So when I time block my calendar, so I use Google Calendar. That's what I prefer for planning. And the nice thing in Google Calendar is you can create multiple calendars, which you can turn on and off. So I actually have a planning calendar. It doesn't block out my schedule in case, I need a meeting, but it basically just shows me, and I can turn it on and off. It just basically shows me what I'm working on each day of the week. Right. So again, I'm never sitting down at my computer and wondering what I'm working on. I always, I'll sit down on my computer, I'll open up my calendar. I'm like, oh, great. Yeah, I have to record podcast today, right? Which is what was on my calendar for today. Now, when I do that, it's great because I get so much done because I'm not thinking about what I need to do before I do it. I already know. And so planning will really help with overwhelm because again, if we look at our bigger projects, which might be like build out my lead magnet funnel, which is a lot of tasks, if we break that down into individual tasks and then we just say, okay, so Monday through Wednesday, I'm just going to write my freebie. Cool. And then on Thursday, I'm going to, write the confirmation email. Cool. And then on Friday, I'm going to start writing my email nurture sequence. And you just do that piece by piece. Okay. Now, when you are sitting down to work, something that can really help with overwhelm is to turn off all your push notifications, right? The only notifications that I turn on are the ones for my team and my calendar reminders, right? Because if I don't have calendar reminders on, I'm not showing up for an appointment. And honestly, I want my team, if they have questions for me, right? If they're doing something for me and they have to asked me a question to move forward, then I want to make sure their question is answered. But, I would turn off all push notifications. I would close the door. I would put your phone in another room and just sit down and focus on what you're doing. Okay. Some people do really well with something called the Pomodoro technique. Now, I don't do this. I'm a bit of a freak show. Like, I can sit down for 5 hours straight and not take a break, not drink water. It's not necessarily healthy. I don't necessarily recommend it, but it works for me. And also these days, I have limited work times because, I have an 11-month-old. So essentially I need to just get shit done when it's time to get shit done. But with the Pomodoro technique, and I know my partner Ryan uses this, he will work for 25 minutes and then take a 5-minute break. Right. And so what that does is it helps you stay sharp. It doesn't kind of wear out the brain, it doesn't make you kind of go cross-eyed. And some people really work with a technique like that. But again, you really have to figure out what works for you. Okay. Now, the fourth thing I want to talk about is just giving yourself grace. Okay. You're not a robot, right? Overwhelm doesn't mean that you're failing, right? We really need to normalize sort of the messy middle of building a business, right? Everybody will feel overwhelmed in the beginning because you're learning an entirely different language. Online marketing is very unique, right? It's very unique. There's a lot of things to learn. But the cool thing is once you understand the foundations of online marketing and tech, you're good, right? What I teach today in HCA is the same thing I was teaching, 6 to 7 years ago. The foundations never change, just sometimes the way we execute them does, right? And so I think that's really important to understand because you get to a point where you get it. You will get there, right? And so it's really important just to sort of understand that it's very normal to feel overwhelmed. It's a part of it. You should expect it, but it doesn't mean that you need to stop taking action. You can work through this, right? Another thing that I think is really important when it comes to overwhelm is perfectionism, right? Perfectionism is really just procrastination in disguise, right? And I think this is another thing that makes us feel overwhelmed is because we really want to make everything perfect, right? Everything we build, we want it to be perfect. But with online marketing, it's all about testing, right? And some things that work for you won't work for me. What works for me won't work for you, right? And we have to just get it out there. And so really, I think done is better than perfect. A really good example of this is Facebook ads. Now, the strategy we teach inside HCA is for every audience, we are testing 2 graphics and 2 copies, right? And so ultimately with each ad set or audience, we have 4 different ads because we combine the short copy with 1 creative, the short copy with creative 2, long copy with creative 1, long copy with creative 2. So ultimately we have 4 ads per audience. Now, the reason we do that is because everything needs to be tested, right? I can't tell you what is going to get you success with your ads. I can't tell you this creative works really well. You should write this copy. So basically what we do is we just make sure that the hook is good, the copy is good, the image is good, and then we test 4 different versions of it, right? And then we see what works. And what's really interesting is for each audience, a different ad combination will work. So you could sit and try to write the perfect ad copy, make the perfect creative. You could spend hours doing it, and it could flop. So the goal is just to get something out there and see what works. So I think this is really, really important to understand because nothing is meant to be perfect. Everything you do today, in a couple years from now, you'll look back and be like, wow, I can't believe I did that, right? You should see all the things I created in my first couple years in business that I never did anything with. I created so many lead magnets. I created ebooks. I created online programs. I did so much when I didn't know what I was doing that I never ended up using, right? And honestly, if you look back at my social media from 2014, when I first got online, it's nothing like what I produce today. It was pretty bad, honestly, but that's just where I was starting from. And so what will help you progress and feel less overwhelmed is just finishing and moving on, right? Not trying to make things perfect, right? Just literally getting it out there, right? For example, if you're making a cake, who cares if the frosting is a little bit lopsided or, it's not perfect, right? The cake is still going to taste good. Okay. So what I really want you to take away from this episode is understanding that overwhelm is always going to be a part of the entrepreneurial journey. It just is, right? But what shifts as you get more experienced is that the overwhelm doesn't stop you from taking action. Okay. And there's nothing wrong with it. If you're feeling overwhelmed, you just need to take a day, take an afternoon, like take a beat, take an hour. Yes, do that, but always come back and start making progress. And so your job with overwhelm is not to eliminate it. It's to learn to keep moving despite it, right? Feel it, notice it, but then don't let it become your excuse. Okay. And so the biggest thing for me that helps with overwhelm with what we've talked about today is really just breaking down projects into individual tasks and making sure my calendar is always time blocked, right? I always know what I'm working on when I sit down at my computer. All right, my friend, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Wealthy Coach podcast. I will see you next Monday, same time, same place, where I help you become wealthy AF.